Welcome to our 25th anniversary conference, where we are celebrating not only courageous leaders who have made a difference, but our overall theme of making a difference. I wanted to start talking about what I was doing about 25 years ago. I was in Los Angeles trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Like a lot of folks in my mid-20s, about all I knew is what I didn't want to do. I come from a family of educators. Both mom and dad worked in public schools for 33 years. So at that time in my life, just about anything would have been cool except being a teacher. But having creditors on my tail, I basically had no choice and showed up at Los Angeles Unified and asked them if I could become a sub. In that moment, there just so happened to be 350 teaching jobs available in South Central. They offered me one on the spot, and the rest, as they say, is history. My first year of teaching was my parents' first year of retirement. In 2018, we Wallaces are celebrating our 58th year of continuous service to public education. But for a while there, I just didn't know what I wanted to do, besides knowing that somehow I wanted to make a difference. So I decided to join Big Brothers. It's a big day for me when I received that letter from Big Brothers saying that I had been chosen. And you know, Big Brothers is this remarkable organization that's well known for making a big difference in the lives of the littles. What Big Brothers is known less for, though, is the big impact it has in the bigs. Because it turns out that a great way to help young men get their acts together is to give them an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of young people. This is Matthew Cotton and me in our first year together. I love the no socks. Here we are a few years later when Amy and I got married. Here we are a few years later when the kids are starting to come along. And here we are just a couple years ago. This is Myron Cotton, Matthew's mom, who came to visit us for a week while we were on our sabbatical in Spain just a couple years ago. It's been just a great, great match. One that was solidified when Matthew, Myron, and I went through our first real big challenge together, which was finding an acceptable place for Matthew to go to school. I thought, coming from my background, that I had a good idea about how some of our public schools can really be struggling, but nothing prepared me for what I saw at that district school that Matthew had been assigned to. And at that time, there were absolutely no options. So Myron decided that Matthew would live with his grandparents down in Compton so that he could attend a private school near their house. And my job as the big brother was to pick Matthew up at his mother's on Sunday afternoons, to play with him for several hours, and then to take him to his grandparents. And we would always have so much fun together. But then in the car, he would remember that he wasn't going home. And so he would break down into these great sobbing tears because he just couldn't understand why it was that he could not live with his mother. I'm telling you, those are the kinds of tears you just never forget. 5 years later, we had to find a high school for Matthew. He came back to his mom's. We decided to try LA High. You guys know LA High. It is the oldest high school in all of Southern California, founded in 1873. As Wikipedia describes it, the school was considered an architectural jewel of the city, strategically located high atop a hill where all could see it with pride. The first principal of that school was named William Lucky. Well, 120 years later, when Matthew and Myron came by, LA High had moved away from its tradition of being a jewel of the city, had come away from its location of being high atop a hill where all could look at it with pride, and where Matthew and Myron had become among the unlucky, those assigned to LA High with absolutely no other place to go. I wish all of you in this room could have been with us to see what LA High was like in the mid-90s. There were more than 5,000 kids on that campus. It was a multi-track calendar. The lack of academic coherence in the program. There were some really nice teachers that were there, but just completely overwhelmed. One of them said to us at conferences that if we had any other option for Matthew, she highly, highly recommended that we would take it. That night, I was walking an exterior hallway. I said, Matthew, why does the place smell like urine? Is it because homeless people come onto the campus at night? Jed, kids piss in the hallways because they're afraid to go to the bathroom. From a jewel of the city to that. And so it happened all over again. Myron had a brother who was living in El Paso, Texas, who agreed to take Matthew in so Matthew could attend the public school near his house. And 4 years later, Amy and I were there to see Matthew graduate. We remember so distinctly, arching above the arch through which all the graduates came, the most stunning rainbow that Amy and I have ever seen. Matthew found his rainbow. He was able to get a decent education, and he was able to graduate from high school. But he had to live away from his mother from the age of 8 in order to do it. But seeing this up close with Matthew and Myron is what led me to embrace my destiny, to, like mom and dad, become an educator and try to make my difference. 25 years later, just last month, I was making a visit to Teach Charter School. It's in South Central Los Angeles, amazing organization, started by this group of founders led by Mildred Cunningham, and still led to this day by these senior leaders that have such deep, deep roots in the community. And at the end of the school visit, I met this young man, Ryan Allison. Ryan is the first student to ever enroll in Teach. And on this day, it was just so great to be able to talk to him about his plans for graduation and to hear him deliberating about which college admissions he was going to accept. I asked him where he lived. He said, Las Vegas. Las Vegas. Whereupon he explained that something had happened in his family. And it was necessary a couple of years ago for his mom and his dad to move to Las Vegas. But they loved Teach so much, they decided that Ryan would live with his grandfather so he could complete his studies and graduate from Teach. 25 years later, rather than South Central being this place from which parents are desperately sending their kids out in order to get a good public education, South Central is becoming this place where parents are sending their kids back in. Across all of South Central, scores of schools offering programs way better than anything that was available during Matthew and Myron's time. Just like across all of Los Angeles, we have over 250 charter schools serving 115,000 students, shown by study after study to be performing better with kids than traditional public schools. And just like across the entire state of California now, we have nearly 1,300 schools serving 630,000 students, schools that recognize our societal belief that public education should not be a one-size-fits-all proposition, but one where we customize the needs of our programs to the kids and to the communities where we serve. The problem is that we just have so much further to go. That school that was so struggling that first served Matthew all those years ago What's happening there today? Well, CCSA recently published a study showing how much funding the school district spends at each of its school sites in comparison to how much it receives for each of the students who are attending these different sites. We turned it into a website, followthefunding.org, where you may see how millions of dollars are taken from hundreds of district schools every year, with the highest amounts taken from the highest need schools in South Central and East Los Angeles. And that school that Matthew was assigned to, Wilton Place, $1.8 million sucked away every year from a school serving 780 mostly high-need students. But the thing that's so unbelievable is that no one knows about it because the district's finances are just so opaque and Byzantine. A friend of mine recently got a briefing from senior fiscal staff from LA Unified. He said halfway through the briefing, he said, why isn't the district just simply more transparent about its finances? You know what the answer was? Because if people knew where the money was spent, everyone would want to go charter. This ridiculous notion that somehow charter schools are less fiscally transparent. I agree. There is a massive problem in fiscal transparency in public education. It is the complete lack of inscrutability of our central bureaucracies that are sucking millions of dollars away from schools like Wilton Place every year. And what are the public schools that don't behave like this? Charter schools. We are the ones that receive our money at the school level, approve our budgets, and get annual fiscal audits all the way down to the school level so everyone can see where the funding is going, proving that charter schools have become the most fiscally transparent of all of our public schools. LA High, what's happening at LA High? Well, due to this charter school community building a lot of school facilities and helping pass Prop 39 so the district could build some more of its own, LA High came off of the multi-track calendar. But despite that, to this day, at LA High, only 9% of students are meeting or exceeding standards in math. Now, there is a magnet on the campus where 55% of kids are meeting or exceeding standards in math. But in order to gain admission to that school, you must enter performing at grade level in math, meaning that Matthew could not have attended there. Just like Matthew could not attend the scores of other magnets that the district has created in recent years that use such selective admissions criteria. All these years later, Matthew would still not have a high-quality district option available to him. This is a problem that exists all across our state. Have you guys seen this latest article from Sacramento? A student attending a magnet with a severe underrepresentation of African American and Latino students conducted this appalling study, supposedly finding that Asian and Caucasian students have higher IQs, and thus the school's selective admissions criteria were justified. Now, everybody gets all up in arms. Blame the kid, no doubt, it's outrageous, all of that. But folks, the administration of that school is using selective admissions criteria, grades, test scores, teacher evaluations, and discipline records it knows screens out kids by race. The only difference between what the kid was doing and what the administrators were doing is the administrators are supposed to know better. This is a story that our family knows very well. Our local school district stopped our K-8 charter from opening a high school as fast as we wanted, and so we needed to find a place for our daughter Tess to go to high school. And we, like many other parents, looked at our district-assigned school and found it to be simply not an option. Some families, they chose to go private, and they helped their kids assemble their applications, grades, test scores, teacher evaluations, discipline records, which is okay for some families, but it's not okay for us. We are a public school family, so we kept looking. What did we find? A host of magnets and other district programs, including this very school, that have admissions practices requiring that you submit grades, test scores, teacher evaluations, and discipline records. Exactly like the privates, which in my view essentially makes them privates. Because in my opinion, the central defining characteristic of a public school is that it serves the public. This ridiculous notion that somehow charter schools are privatizing public education. I agree. There's a massive problem in privatization in our public education system right now. It's the privatizing that happens when parents see that their district options are so poor that they feel like they have no choice but to go private. And for many of the district schools that remain, they've now adopted admission practices that make them indiscernible from private schools. And what are the public schools that do not behave this way? Charter schools. Our schools use no selective admissions criteria whatsoever. Proving that charter schools have grown to have the fairest admissions of all public schools in the state of California. The problem is that there just aren't enough of them. Like that great charter school that Tess applied to and ended up 93rd on the waiting list. So we had to move. Not, fortunately, all the way to El Paso, but because we have privileges that Matthew and Myron didn't, just to a nearby community where there is a good charter school and where if we didn't get in, we could live with the district option that does not use any selective admissions criteria. And as it just so turns out, Tess and our son Quentin both got into the charter, and that's where we are to this very day. But it's appalling that our public school system puts families like ours in a situation where we have to disrupt our lives simply to be able to enroll our kids in a public school that reflects our values. And for hundreds of thousands of other families, it's even worse. No option whatsoever, no matter what level of disruption they are willing to subject themselves to. It's because something has become more important to the central bureaucracies which control so many of our district schools. More important than closing achievement gaps. More important than getting kids into college. More important than customizing programs to the individual needs of students. More important, ultimately, than the developmental needs of our youth, but the financial needs of the bureaucracy itself. Like, again, LA Unified. Over the decades, they have accrued a $13.6 billion unfunded liability. $13.6 billion, that would have been enough to have bought all of Whole Foods, the 137th largest publicly traded company in the United States, and to still have $200 million left over. This ridiculous notion that somehow charter schools are less accountable, I agree. There is a huge accountability problem in our public education system. It's the lack of accountability within our central bureaucracies that are allowing these financial train wrecks to explode, knowing that when they go under, the state will have to bail them out. And what are the public schools that do not behave like this? Charter schools. Because we know. We know that if we do not manage our finances well, we will close. And so we do the right thing even when it's hard. Charter schools have virtually no unfunded liabilities whatsoever, proving that charter schools have become the most accountable of all public schools. So this is where we stand after our first quarter century of work. On top of all this amazing stuff we're doing with 630,000 kids, charter schools have become the most fiscally transparent, having the fairest admissions, and the most accountable of all public schools, which in my estimation proves not only, of course, that charter schools are public schools, but in my opinion that we have become the most public of all of California's public schools. And you would think, having made this much progress over the last 25 years, that we would be experiencing this moment of very warm embrace, right? But instead, what do we see? A backlash unlike anything that we've ever seen before, right? Defenders of the bureaucracy lawyering up, denying every charter, fighting every facility, suing counties that approve charters on appeal, spending millions on media campaigns that outright lie about charter schools, telling parents that they may lose their right to enroll their kids in any public school if they dare express interest in enrolling in a charter school. Folks, I'm not making this stuff up. It's all part of a strategy from the defenders of the bureaucracy. An escalation of that conflict happened just in June when the National Education Association, the NEA, for the first time in 17 years, updated their charter school policy, finding that charter schools are a now proven failed experiment. And because of that, 3 changes are needed. Number 1, that until issues of fiscal transparency and accountability can be addressed, there must be a moratorium on charter school growth. Number 2, that the only entities that should be able to authorize a charter school are school districts. And number 3, that school districts should be able to deny a charter for virtually any reason, including fiscal impact. 1 month later, having not updated its charter school policy for many years, the California Teachers Association updated their policy to be a virtual replication of the NEA new policy. Which brings us now to this governor's race. Because what we find is that historically in California, as Margaret was saying, we have been very fortunate that governors have been supportive of charter schools. Republicans and Democrats all the way back to 1992. And Governor Brown has been phenomenally supportive of our schools. And most of the candidates running, all of the candidates running really, have at least moderate levels of support for charter schools. Gavin Newsom, while he hasn't really had any policy impact on our schools whatsoever, he has been available to make some school visits and always available to say a few nice things. Until this year, when suddenly he decides that he needs the endorsement and the funding of the California Teachers Association. What charter school policies does he suddenly start espousing? Anybody want to guess? Number 1, that until issues of accountability and transparency can be resolved, there should be a moratorium on charter schools. That the only entities that should be able to authorize a charter school are school districts, and that school districts should be able to deny charters and renewals citing fiscal impact. You heard that right. Gavin Newsom has signed on to the idea that your school district should be able to close your school and you have absolutely no right of appeal, except for like technicalities around procedural stuff. This is probably the most hostile, the most threatening position that anybody this close to the governorship has ever had. It means that families in our 1,300 schools are going to need to lay awake nights worrying that perhaps their school will be closed. And for hundreds of thousands of other parents, they will know that there is no hope that something better might come to them. Fortunately, like the 630,000 students attending California's charter schools, we have a better option that we've all seen this morning. Not just a better option, a phenomenal option. Former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. I've nearly been on this job now 10 years. In all that time, I have never come across a more courageous, full-throated supporter, champion for kids and for families than Antonio Villaraigosa. A man who along the way recognized that very powerful interests had come together to support policies that were not in the interests of kids. And he had the courage to stand up. He had the courage to make the difference. I have been on the phone with Antonio Villaraigosa after 11 p.m. at night, working the additional votes that needed to happen to make breakthroughs happen. And now Antonio has this vision for difference making for kids to go all the way to the state level, which was why it was abundantly clear to me and everyone at CCSA Advocates that we must endorse Antonio Villaraigosa to be the next governor of the state of California. This is the level of difference making that's now been put in front of us as we prepare to embark on our second quarter century of work. And it is a tall hill. But folks, we have taken tall hills before. We have overcome front runners before, like the one that used to have dominion over LA High, where recently we had this highly respected charter school organization open a new high school, City Charter. A shining jewel of what the charter school movement's all about. I would say a jewel of the city of Los Angeles, exactly the kind of program that the founders of LA High all those years ago envisioned for their campus. You know, a school that uses absolutely no selective admissions criteria, the kind of school that Matthew could have attended. But one man, Steve Zimmer, an LA Unified board member, had it out for City, and made sure that after 1 year on that campus, it was forced to leave because supposedly there was no space. Folks, like I said, the campus used to host over 5,000 kids in the 1990s. 2 years ago, it was at 1,200 kids, and there's no space for City? And yet, he kicked them off anyway. And the school, having absolutely no other place to go, it closed. And it is my view, though the thing that just beyond that, then at the same time, for Steve Zimmer in other settings to be saying that he was a friend of charters. Oh. In my view, what Steve Zimmer did to City is what Gavin Newsom wants to see happen across this entire state. To inflict major harm on our schools and to claim to be our friend. And so we have no choice but to deal with Newsom in the same way that City dealt with Zimmer. Valerie Brahma, the amazing leader of City Charter, what did she do? She saw that there was another candidate in the landscape, Nick Melvoin, endorsed by Antonio Villaraigosa, another full-throated, courageous champion for charter schools, right? What did Valerie do? Man, she went out and she made sure all of her parents were in Charter Nation. She educated everybody she knew about the importance of this vote. And she did everything she could to get out the vote. Precinct walking, phone banking, encouraging all the other charter leaders to do the same. And what resulted was a grassroots effort unlike anything that we have seen before. Now, folks, people spent a lot of time focusing on how much money went into the LA races, and there was a lot. Don't get me wrong, we are very fortunate to have such generous supporters. But focusing on that can sometimes lead you to miss a really important part of the story. In 2013, the first time that we took on Zimmer, 5 minutes after the polls closed, they announced the absentee ballots. We were down by 4,000 votes. 4 years later, 5 minutes after the polls closed, we're up 6,000 votes. Absentee ballots, that's not money. That's your base coming out in major ways. Charter school parents turned out at 3 times the rate of other registered voters, and in the end, we won. It was decisive. It wasn't even close. And so now the question is, are we able to do it at a state level? And so that's why it's so important that everybody in this room, everybody in this conference must act like Valerie did. You must get yourselves into Charter Nation. You must equip yourself to educate others about the importance of this election. And we must do absolutely everything that we can to get out the vote, which in a state election like this means phone banking, making those calls, because we know our greatest asset are our own people, voter by voter, making the case. 630,000 calls going out across this state so that the charter voice is heard. That's why we've made this goal, before we get to the primary, just 70 days from now, that we achieve CPK. CPK, a call per kid. And folks, as soon as this conference is over, I am hitting the road. And I am going to be talking to everybody that I can possibly find about them doing their part. But the real thing for us to focus on right now is if just the attendees of this conference, all made the commitment to do your part, we would get halfway to our goal. So please, I'm asking all of you, go by the CCSA Advocates booth, sign up for Charter Nation if you haven't already, get the materials that you will need to help educate others about the importance of the vote, and get your CPK button, signifying that you are going to do your part to help get out the vote. And you can also start to work on it right this second, if you haven't already, by texting CPK to 52886. I'll repeat that. 52886 is the number to text CPK. Good, I'm glad. I see some people grabbing for phones. We've been saying it in other settings as well. I'll say it one more time. Texting to 52886. The three letters CPK. A call per kid. Remembering what it is that drew us in the first place. Like that spirit that drew me to join Big Brothers all those years ago. The spirit that's led all of us to join the charter school movement. That desire to make a difference in the life of a kid. And then put in the company of an incredible community like our own, where people support, learn from, and teach one another in such amazing ways that a collective voice for difference-making emerges far beyond anything that any of us ever imagined. Something that is never seen in its full potential as boldly as when we gather for our annual conference. This time, above all others, when we can see not just the amazing difference that the charter school movement is making in the littles, the students that we're all working so hard to help, but also in we, the bigs. People who are supporting one another and in locked arm solidarity with absolutely everybody connected to our movement is summoning the strength to finally achieve what those who made LA High wanted all those years ago. To put our public schools up where they belong. To put them high atop a hill where they can be looked at with pride. For them to be recognized for what they rightly should be, the crown jewels of our society. Ensuring that every Matthew, every Ryan, every student, every family is lucky because they are being provided what is their birthright, a stunningly great public education. Thank you for all that you are doing for California's public school students. Thank you for what you're doing for the California Charter School movement. Thank you for being here, folks. Just keep going.